Good morning, everybody. Here we are on the third day of session. And this mountain has been feverishly working on her Dharma talk about mountains and sutra, mountains and rivers sutra, or mountains and waters sutra also. No, I just received this book yesterday called The Mountains and Waters Sutra, written by Shohaku Okumura, with contributions by Carl Bielefeld, who's a translator Gary Snyder, and Issho Fujita. And then I've also been reading this book, Mountains and Rivers Sutra. These are Norman Fisher's talks that have been transcribed, and Kuya Minogue, who's the resident priest at the Creston Zendo in British Columbia, has put some really nice exercises together, a weekly study on this beautiful sutra. And of course, I have loved this one, The Dark Side of the Mirror, and I use it a lot. He's really clear, David Brazier is to me. And so I'm going to be quoting some of his work as well today. So I'm going to begin actually with a few quotes from my Now and Zen calendar that I got from the Daifukuji Soto mission in Honalo on Hawaii Island when we were there in December. And every month there's a new quote and a picture, a drawing, an artwork. So the first one that I wanted to share was Maizumi Roshi. Have good trust in yourself, not in the one that you think you should be, but in the one that you are. Have good trust in yourself, not in the one that you think you should be, but in the one that you are. And then this one quote by Brad Warner. If you know Brad Warner, he wrote the book on meditation, Shut Up and Sit Down. Basically, that's what his book. He says, real wisdom is the ability to understand the incredible extent to which you bullshit yourself every single moment of every day. Let me read that. Real wisdom is the ability to understand the incredible extent to which you bullshit yourself every single moment of every day. All right, so from that lofty plane, we've come right down to the dirt, which is our life, isn't it? And then here's one by Robert Aiken. When I move to complain about others, I vow with all beings to remember that karma is endless and it's loving that leads to love. Aiken Roshi, what a fabulous teacher he was. And he was on the Big Island. He had a center there. And he was instrumental in the Buddhist Peace Fellowship, getting that started nationally. And then the fourth quote, final quote I'm going to share at the beginning is by Bernie Glassman. Let me give you a wonderful Zen practice. Wake up in the morning, look in the mirror, and laugh at yourself. Okay, I have to practice that more often. Wake up in the morning, look in the mirror, and laugh at yourself. I gotta practice that one for sure. Okay. Okay. So I was thinking about this Mountains and Rivers Sutra and why I'm so drawn to it. And I thought, oh yeah, right. I was born on a mountain on Hawaii Island. I totally forgot that part. I was always looking at the peaks, but I was on the slopes. This is where our little town was, Kukayao. I just realized that yesterday, and I think Dogen talks about that. You know, when you're in something, you can't see it, you know, you just can't see it. You have to kind of step away and to be able to see it. But then also he said, you know, your eyes, or maybe it was Norman Fisher who said, your eyes can't see the eyes, right? The eyes, we can't see our own eyes, but we can see out, but we can't see our own eyes. So I was having a very good time getting carried away, thinking about my home on the slopes of Mauna Kea, this big mountain. And I wanted to share with you just this topographical map of Hawaii Island, all right? Just so you see what I was living on. Okay, can you see that map there? I don't know if I can make it bigger. But anyway, see this Mauna Kea? That's the mountain that's 13,000 feet high, almost 14,000 feet high. But below sea level, it is 32,000 feet high. Mauna Loa is a kind of a bigger mountain and just a little bit less tall than Mauna Kea, Mauna Loa. Kilauea is another, it's where the active volcano is on Hawaii Island that is flowing down to the sea this way, to the south and to the east. Hilo is the capital. There's another mountain here, Hualalai, and then there's one here, Kohala. These are a little smaller, but there are 4 big mountains on this one island. I grew up right here on the northeast coast of the island. Hamakua, the district of Hamakua, which means the breath of the ancestors. Can everybody see that okay? All right. All right, so I just wanted you to see why. And so I grew up here, you know, the mountain goes from the top down to, these are cliffs over here, about 800 feet high cliffs, and looking out over the ocean. There's another island forming over here, Loihi, of a volcanic eruption, a small one. So that's why I really am appreciating Dogen's Mountains and Rivers Sutra. So here we are the plains, right? So this is the Plains Sutra here in Chicago. Right? Beautiful plains here. So when Dogen chose the title, Norman Fisher thinks that he was probably thinking of a famous poem by the Song Dynasty poet, Sudong Bo. And of course, Norman is a poet as well. So, and in this poem, by this 12th century Buddhist monk who lived in a high mountain hermitage in China. And he says, one night in an experience of true transcendence, Sudong Bo stayed up from dusk until dawn meditating. And in the morning he wrote, the stream with its sounds is his long, broad tongue. The looming mountain, his wide awake body. Throughout the night, song after song, how can I speak at dawn? So the sound of the stream is the long, broad tongue. The form of the mountain is his awakened body. All night long, I hear millions of sutras. How can I explain this in the morning? So the poet is saying he would never presume to write a sutra after all of this. He's saying the mountains and rivers are the sutra. So I'm also listening to Norman Fisher gave some talks at Upaya, and he also gave some more recent talks, which are on his everyday Zen site. So I've been listening to those as well. And he says, you know, as a traditional Buddhist teacher, you never want to be innovative because you're channeling what other teachers have said. And in the Mountains and Rivers Sutra, he says, before I was practicing Zen, mountains were mountains and rivers were rivers. As I plunged deeply into my practice, mountains were not mountains and rivers were not rivers. But now that my practice is settled in my heart, mountains were mountains and rivers were rivers. So isn't that practice? You start out with a certain point of view, but after a while, your point of view gets thrown out the window and gets eroded until with practice, you end up being the same person you were before practice, except different because you've gone through the process, this process of Zazen, which I have been very much enjoying, and also just kind of noticing what I've been doing. And, you know, there's different ways to practice Zazen, right? One way is to be really energetic about it, right? You're on top of it. The moment a thought arises, you are back to your breath. I know Susan said that in one of her classes, right? When she was teaching beginning meditation, right? And you're counting the breath. She said, as soon as a thought enters, go back to one. And I was like, wow, that is really strict. But really, I think that is really good, actually. I was being too lax, just like letting whatever happens, happens, right? Because I've been practicing that, and it is not easy to do. And maybe I was thinking, oh, well, you know, if you're beginners, you don't want to set too high of a bar because then you'll get all discouraged, right? But I don't know, what about me right now? I'm a seasoned practitioner. I think I better start doing that. Dogen says, practice as if your hair is on fire. What does that mean? Does that mean like daydreaming off? I don't think so. So I think I will definitely work on that during this session. And I'm going to notice if something happens. I'm going to see what happens. That's our practice anyway, right? We try something really, really wholeheartedly, try something, and then notice what happens after. And if something, it was good, well, then we want to keep that, right? But then not get too attached, right? But that is I think, energetic form of practice. And I think it's an important form of practice. So Susan, I take it back. Yeah, because Zen is not your usual logical way of seeing the world, right? And in order to be able to see it in a non-logical manner, I think this practice of Zazen is critical. So, in Shohaku's book, he says that Dogen emphasizes the term fu-e. Fu means not. Fu means not. A means non-understanding. In common usage, this means I don't understand. Fu-e, I don't understand. And then Dogen uses fu-e as a compound and adds do not understanding. Translation, do not understanding. Go beyond understanding. To embody and practice without stagnating in understanding. To embody and practice without stagnating in understanding. That's going beyond understanding. Not trying to understand this. It's really practicing our practice of not knowing. Don't let the mind be stuck in understanding. In the Shobo Genzo, there's another fascicle called Kenbutsu, which is seeing Buddha. And in it, Dogen wrote, in seeing Buddha, there are many forms that are seen and no form that is seen. That is, I do not understand the Buddha Dharma. In not seeing Buddha, there are many forms that are not seen and no form that is not seen. And that is, people who understand the Buddha Dharma have attained it. And that is, people who understand the Buddha Dharma have attained it. All this understanding and not understanding and non-understanding, right? So Norman says, so Dogen is serious and saying, those who have attained Buddha Dharma and really understand it, really don't see it. They see something, good for them, congratulations. It's not the Buddha Dharma that Dogen is talking about. So if you say, I've got it, probably don't have it. Say. The Buddha Dharma that Dogen is talking about has to do with not understanding, with seeing non-form. Let me say that again. The Buddha Dharma that Dogen is talking about has to do with not understanding, with seeing non-form. What he is talking about is a feeling of wonderment and depth beyond explanations, beyond understanding. a feeling of tremendous humility just to be alive in this bright world with all that's in it. To understand that and then to forget it. So this usage of understand and not understand came from this conversation between the sixth ancestor, Huineng, and a monk that appears in Shinji Shobo Genzo, case 59. A monk asked, who attained the meaning of Huang Mei? He's the fifth ancestor. Who attained the meaning of Huang Mei? And Huineng, who is the famous sixth ancestor, Chinese ancestor, says, those who understand the Buddha Dharma attained it. The monk asked, did you attain it, Master? Huineng said, no, I did not attain it. The monk asked, but wait, you're his successor. Why didn't you attain it? Huineng said, I don't understand the Buddha Dharma. Okay, if the great sixth ancestor didn't get the Buddha Dharma, well then I think it's okay that I don't get the Buddha Dharma. And Shohaku has a nice way of saying this. He says, I'm keeping something in my mind without grasping it with my personal understanding. I have been doing non-understanding for 40 years. This kind of non-understanding is not important. In Zazen, we are letting go of our thoughts. Looking from one side, you see an entire range, talking about a mountain, but from another side, you see one peak. Fingertips can touch everything except itself. We are not removed. Our life is lived in the middle of time and space. We practice non-understanding. Yeah. So let's talk about Zazen a little bit. The way Shohaku Okumura practiced sesshin in Japan, in Osaka or Kyoto, they sat for 50 minutes, and did 10 minutes of kinyan. And they did that for 14 periods a day, 5 days a week. Talk about bare bones sesshin. We've done bare bones sesshin before where we just sit. No Dharma talks, no Daisan or Doksan, no service. We just sit. And it's really quite nice, actually. He said, though, he did have meal breaks and rest periods as well. He said, sesshin has a different reality from ordinary life. When I continue this way in Zazen, moment by moment for 14 hours a day, I get tired. Somehow my mind calms down, which happens, right? If someone recently triggered my anger, thoughts come up about that person while I'm sitting. I might try to figure out why the person said or did such a thing. Anger also may arise. Anger is a kind of energy. It comes back no matter how many times I try to let go. When I am sitting facing the wall, the person and the incident are already gone, yet the person is also still sitting within me. The instance that brought up my anger is gone, yet still seems to be there. While sitting, I may try to figure out what kind of person this is and why he or she did this or that. So, sitting moment by moment for 14 hours a day, right? I get tired. Somehow my mind calms down. Eventually, I realize that this person, that the person that did this thing, that angered me, is gone. The anger, though, is still there as energy. When I sit with this energy, it goes deeper and deeper. This is no longer the anger caused by the particular action or particular person. Instead, I find that this anger is myself. And still I sit and try to let go of whatever comes up to just keep sitting. Sometimes, not always, I experience that the anger disappears. I have found that anger is not really caused by a particular person's action. The anger is inside me. That person's act or speech simply opens the lid of my consciousness. Feelings and thoughts always come from our own consciousness. They come up in Zazen when we let go, we can let go, and that's okay. Zazen is unique and precious practice. In the Zendo, we can let go of everything. This is really liberation. Not only from our daily lives, but also from the karmic consciousness created by our twisted karma. In Zazen, we are determined not to take action based on the thoughts coming and going. Therefore, we don't create new karma. This is what it means that in Zazen, we are liberated from our karma. So we're not creating karma when we sit. We're not creating karma. Okumura, Shohaku Okumura says his teachers, Uchiyama Roshi and Sawaki Roshi, taught that Zazen itself is the true Dharma I. In other words, not seeing things with our karmic consciousness. So we each have karmic consciousness. And Uchiyama Roshi, he has the phrase, opening the hand of thought, where we can open our hand, let go, and no actions arise. Seems like we should sit Zazen all the time, doesn't it? In Japan, they have this custom. They say, in our Zazen, we see things from our coffin. See? So this means we are as if already dead. We have no opinions, no desires, and no right to request anything of anyone. In Japan, when someone dies, they place a casket in their house or a temple. Usually it's in their house. And people stay with the casket overnight and they talk to the body there. And they can say anything because the body can no longer disagree. Disagree or complain or argue. So according to Sawaki Roshi, In Zazen, we are like the dead person in the casket. Whatever people say about me, good or bad, I cannot argue with them. I just keep silently sitting in Zazen. So our practice then in daily life is to create good karma by our actions, right? It says, in this context, wholesome karma means to manifest in daily life what we experience in Zazen. No separation between myself and other people and the myriad things. That is how the Buddha or Christ is expressed in everyday activities. No separation. So yes, this is the Bodhisattva path, right? We're walking on, right? Trying not to be separate, trying to be human. So talking about this true Dharma I. Norman is saying here, viewing things with the true Dharma I and viewing things with our karmic consciousness are very different. As bodhisattvas, we need to see things with a true Dharma I. Still, we are not completely free from our karmic consciousness. We have to live out our karma. Precisely speaking, our karmic condition is the only device we can use to practice. There's our karmic consciousness again. In the Yogacara school, they teach about this ego consciousness, clinging to the seeds in, they call it our storehouse consciousness. And so this is like the 7th level. So, and this storehouse consciousness is the unconscious level of experience where our habits are maintained and where they transform. Unconscious level. So and this ego consciousness, also known as the 7th consciousness, controls the first 6. And those first 6 consciousness, I think they are all this feeling senses, but I need to study this a little bit better before I can present it. But I've been just kind of thinking about this unconscious level, right? So I know in mindfulness meditation, we're trying to be able to see what we do, what we are thinking. So it is not totally unconscious, right? We're trying, and it's not, it's not possible, I think, as humans to see everything, right? I think that's like a goal that is not helpful. But we are trying to be mindful of our actions and our thoughts. And I think we can be that to a certain extent. And as we use the bodhisattva practices, the 6 perfections of a bodhisattva, all of those, right? Patience especially, right? That's helping us to be on this path of being alert to what we are doing. And eventually I feel, it affects this 7th level of unconscious dimension. And he's saying, you know, when we are just let my desires, the self, right, my desires and my preference overcome, it becomes just very self-centered, right, and distorted. And we have to just watch ourselves in this way. In Zazen, or with our true Dharma eye, we see that distortion. We see how self-centered we are. So this is wisdom in a very practical way. And that is why Zazen is the practice of repentance and also the practice of the Bodhisattva vow. So we all know that Gatha of Atonement that we chant 5 minutes into our sit first thing in the morning, right? This is a repentance, this atonement for my evil or twisted karma because of the 3 poisons. I really, really like in David Brazier's book, The Dark Side of the Mirror, he has a section on contrition, which I thought was really wonderful. Before I read that, Dogen has written something about contrition in the Shushogi. Contrition before the Buddhas brings purification and salvation, true conviction and earnest endeavor. Here is the way in which to make an act of perfect contrition. May all the Buddhas and ancestors who have become enlightened have compassion upon us, free us from the obstacles, suffering, which we have inherited from our past existence, and lead us in such a way that we may share the merit that fills the universe. All the evil committed by me is caused by beginningless greed, hate, and delusion. All the evil is committed by my body, speech, and mind. I now confess everything wholeheartedly, or I now atone for it all. So Dogen is saying that through contrition, we open the way for the Buddhas to help us naturally. It's kind of like other power thinking here. It's not just about self-power here, but we're opening to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to help us. So contrition functions to make us open to receiving help. Contrition itself doesn't have a purifying function, but the aim is not to transform using a justified state, since in Buddhism there is no final judgment, no punishment or forgiveness, only karmic consequence, which is inexorable. Contrition itself does have a purifying function, but the aim is not to transform using a justified state, since in Buddhism there is no final judgment, no punishment or forgiveness, only karmic consequence, which is inescapable. So how does contrition work in Buddhism? So let's consider this example. You know, perhaps in the course of the day, I lose my temper and say some things that I later regret. I'm seeing the unfortunate consequences of my loss of control. I feel contrite. So there are two levels in this experience of contrition. The first level is regret. This may involve a criticism of myself and resolution to try to do better in the future. Clearly, it will be better for everybody if I keep my anger under control. I shall do better next time, I hope. This is the superficial aspect of contrition. There is, however, a deeper level. Studying the acts of my daily life, I see that I am made this way. Perhaps I shall indeed work with my temper, but there will be other things. No matter how hard I try, I will still be human. Furthermore, my attempt to improve is ego-driven. Let me repeat that. Furthermore, my attempt to improve is ego-driven. The reason that I decided to curry my anger is to have an easier life myself and present in the world as a better person. Even my attempts to do good are shot through with self-serving motivations. Thus, the deeper level is to see that there is no escape. Buddhism is not a matter of exhausting all of our near infinite stock of karma. That would be completely impossible. It is about a change of perception, or genjo, that happened when we truly realize that we are not the most radiant star in the universe and start to play our proper part in the scheme of things. Isn't that amazing? Should I read that again? That was like, all right, so contrition has two levels, okay? And this is about working with absolute humility here. The first level is regret, you know, when you lose it. This may involve, right, a criticism of myself and resolution to try to do better in the future, like, oh my God, what did I just do? I can't believe I just blew my top, right? I have to do better. I must do better in the future. I will do better in the future, okay? Clearly, it will be better for everybody, right? If I keep my anger under control. I don't know, everybody, we say this, you know, everything is the path, and maybe that anger, who knows, has some kind of spark somewhere to do something, but let's stay with this example, okay? So, I hope to do better next time. This is superficial. This is the superficial part of contrition. Superficial. All right, so the deeper level. So studying, right? Being mindful of what I do in my daily life. I see that I am human and I make mistakes. Perhaps I shall indeed curry my temper, but there will be other things. No matter how hard I try, I will still be human. This is the human condition. Who's perfect here? Furthermore, in my attempt to improve, even my attempt to improve is ego-driven. Why? So that I have an easier life. And I want to appear in the world as a good person who is totally equanimous, right? That is, even my attempts to do good are shot through with self-serving motivations. Thus, the deeper level is to see that there is no escape. We say in Zen, give up hope. There's no escape. Give up hope. Buddhism is not a matter of exhausting all of our near infinite stock of karma. That would be completely impossible. Our karmic consciousness, the storehouse there, right? It is about a change of perception, or genjo, right? A change of perception, manifestation that happened when we truly realize that we are not the most radiant star in the universe. Humility, and start to play our proper part in the scheme of things. Okay, it's not to keep laying there in the dirt, right? Like, oh, woe is me. No, we're human. So we make mistakes, so we keep going, right? We also keep going and learn from it. Absolutely learn from it. So here it is. In Buddhism, there is no forgiveness. In Buddhism, therefore, recognition of our nature can lead to a kind of despair. Karma is inexorable, inescapable, and one is never going to be forgiven. There is no sutra on forgiveness. Forgiveness is not really a Buddhist concept. Plenty of modern people want to insert it, but Buddhism solves these problems in a different way. Although we cannot avert karma, contrition does open the way for the Buddhas to help us, because it extinguishes, at least for a little time, the blinding light of ego. Contrition is the gateway to enlightenment. The word contrition in European languages comes from a Latin word meaning crushed. We say this in common speech sometimes. When I realized what I had done, I felt completely crushed. In Buddhism, the state of feeling crushed is precious. These are moments when the ego loses its grip and the gateway to liberation stands open wide. This feeling crushed is precious, this state of feeling crushed. These are moments when the ego loses its grip and the gateway to liberation stands open wide. So Brazier is saying, it seems that in practical terms, the Christian and Buddhist approaches are quite similar. What is different is the metaphysics, what Roshi was talking about yesterday. The framework of ideas used to explain the situation and provide a sustaining image is different, but the liberating intent is much the same. Well, that was a lot. I think we should stop here and open for some discussion. This is a lot, I think. I think this is such great, I don't even know what to call it, teachings for us about the way we view things, about the way we view ourselves, and how compassion is such a key, but wisdom also together has to work together so we can be kind and gentle to ourselves. And then we can start to help others. Or maybe those two are so intertwined, right? You do for one and it naturally affects the other. But let's have some discussion. And I'll try to answer any questions, but this is such a new kind of concept. Takes a little while to let it soak in. Yes, Patrick.
I'm having a hard time understanding the concept that forgiveness is not a part of the Buddhist tradition. You know, when you hear the stories about like where the thief breaks into the monk's house and the monk says, here, take everything, you know, take everything. There has to be forgiveness there, no?
Well, forgiveness seems to imply that a wrong was committed, right? And in that particular story, which I absolutely love, I think Rengetsu, or it was, anyway, that story, the monk is assuming that the person is coming in because the person is desperate. And so that is a natural thing for this person to do. He's desperate. And so the monk says, here, take this, you need it, take it. So I don't see that as being a forgiveness. Chris.
I just have one comment on that exchange there, and then I wanted to make another comment. I too struggle with the forgiveness and not being in Buddhism too a little bit. I think about forgiveness sometimes as it necessarily puts someone above another.
Mm. Mm.
As I have the power to forgive you.
Mm.
And I'm not quite sure how to play with that, but there's something in that for me that's important that I haven't quite figured out. That none of us are actually in the position to be above someone else to do that. But the other thing I wanted to say, I can't exactly remember what part of your talk, but you were talking about how we don't see everything. And of course, we can never see everything outside of, we have a perspective. And I know that in one of Sharon Salzberg's books, she has this little metaphor or tool that she used to say, it's like we're looking at the sky through a straw. She says, what you see is the sky. What you see is true. What you see is there. It's just that it's so small compared to the full sky. And I always try to remember that in situations that I'm looking at this situation through a straw, that there's so much more to it than I'm seeing, and how might I be able, are there ways that I could broaden myself? And if not, can I just recognize that I'm not seeing everything and try to bring that to whatever my response is or whatever my action is. So I really love that.
Yes, so that to me, I see is on a relative level, right? We're just seeing a part. But if you think on the absolute level, then you are the sky. What? Linda, it looks like you're thinking very hard there.
I guess I had similar questions about forgiveness. I mean, I like Chris's statement, but it always seems that somebody's better than the other. But I think our interpretation of forgiveness seems to be that, well, if I forgive you, now everything is okay. And it's all right. It's all right what you did to me or what I did to you, and now it's okay and we'll move on. But it doesn't, that's not what it is. It's not saying it's okay. But it is saying it is saying somehow that I'm going to move, we can move past it. I'm not going to hold a grudge. I'm not going to think about it for the rest of my life. But it's more of an equanimity. We'll move past it. It is what it is. It's not saying that it's okay. I think that's an interesting concept that Jin was talking about, that really makes it equal. We're not the brightest star in the sky. We're all just stars. So a part of me always liked that concept in Buddhism, that there is no forgiveness, that there is nothing to forgive. Especially coming from a tradition that put such a great emphasis on sin and forgiveness and going to confession. All of a sudden it was okay and I could go out and do it again, and it was just an endless cycle, and it just didn't make sense to me. It makes sense to me. There is nothing to forgive. You know, we are equals. We will do it again. We will get past it and move on. We are all part of the net.
Yeah, and the sutra that we chant in the mornings, the identity of relative and absolute, right? It says, do not judge by any standards. If you do not see the way, you do not see it, even as you walk on it, right? So in a sense, when we judge, of course there's right and wrong. Do not judge by any standard. Yeah. And that's an interesting concept, because in the relative, of course, there is right and wrong, right? We do not kill, we do not steal. Those are the precepts we take. We don't put others above ourselves, right? That's there's a path that we are walking that has right and wrong elements in it.
I'm not very good on spur of the moment. I like the phrase that Cummings used, go out and do, what was this he said about getting good trouble, I think he called it.
Yeah, yeah.
I read someplace the Dalai Lama talked about anger, and that there is a good kind of anger, like there's a good kind of trouble. That there are things that are wrong in the world that you have to respond to, but you respond to it with an anger that says, I want to do something good. I want to make people's lives better. I'm going to respond to it, but I'm not going to hurt anybody. Yeah, he said it much more eloquently, of course, but it's basically what Cummings was saying. There's a good anger. It's not that you just see it all as one and I'm not going to respond to it. I think that's the wrong perception.
I agree. Thank you.
Well, whether you think it's good anger or bad anger, it's if you're angry, you're angry. So I don't agree with this idea that, well, it may be that Buddhism doesn't teach forgiveness, but then I'm a bad Buddhist, because I think forgiveness is a terribly important practice. And I think we misunderstand what forgiveness is. It's not feeling superior to someone. It's about giving up holding anger in my heart. I see there's a reason why I'm angry, and there was a good reason. I shouldn't have been mistreated or betrayed in that way, and so my anger is completely justified. But I also realize that if that anger takes up residence in my heart, I'm going to become bitter and small, and so I make a choice to let go of wishing that person harm. I make a conscious choice, and I think that's a really important practice, and I don't care if it's not Buddhist or not. Then I'm not a Buddhist. When I forgive, I just don't agree with David on that point. So,
Well, I can see if you have been wronged and you have held this anger in your heart, as you release it, that is a sense of an act of contrition, right? That you are letting go of this anger. It seems to me that's some kind of contrition.
well, how is that different than forgiveness?
I think it's a matter of definition here, what you're calling forgiveness. To me, it's not, I guess it's not the forgiveness that I was raised to understand, but it's well, like you said, it's not hanging on to it forever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what makes you bitter, but it doesn't make it right. But I can just, move past it. I'm not going to forgive you and now all things are okay. It's not okay.
But I think that's one of the misunderstandings about forgiveness. We think that we can just move past it by saying it's okay, but we're not built that way. We don't just move past things like that. We hold something in our heart, some animosity towards that person, and I think the practice of forgiveness is being very intentional about noticing that I have that animosity, and I'm going to choose to let go of it, not because I'm moving past what the person did or I'm saying it's okay what they did, but I want to get on with my life. And as long as I hold that animosity towards that person, I'm hurting myself. And so I don't think forgiveness is just saying it's okay and moving on. I don't think we really do that, if we're being really honest.
Can you hear me? Can anyone hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. I was gonna say in forgiveness, I was told once, and it kind of stuck with me, that forgiveness is sort of a form of self-care, that you don't really have to tell a person that you forgive them, but just care enough about yourself to let that go and realize that all people get hurt by others. And of course that would happen to me too. And I feeling like I care enough about myself to not let that ripen in me was just a new way for me to think about it.
Yeah, it's a new change in your perception that is happening right there. And you're realizing holding on to this is not helping you at all, right? And so in that actual act of letting go, in a sense, your ego is relinquishing control for you to be able to let go. And in that moment, right, he's saying in that moment, ego is really losing its grip, and liberation, right? Awakeness is open to you right there. That is happening.
But isn't that again forgiveness? For me, I think forgiveness is something that it's not something that's done once. It's something that's done consistently. If somebody wrongs me, if I don't forgive, I have some sort of resentment. And if I don't forgive, for me, it's an ongoing process. It's not something I can forgive, and everything is going to be good from there on. It's something I have to do every time I see that person, every time I even think about that person or interact with that person. If I don't forgive them, I'm holding on to, I've just got this resentment inside of me.
Tanya.
Feel like we are talking here about forgiveness from self perspective and forgiveness that we are receiving. And I think that what Brazier is talking about is the Christian notion of forgiveness, where you are the one who is receiving it, and where it is the God that forgives you. And so then, having been forgiven, you can move on from the bad stuff that you have done. That is something very different than the need of you to forgive to somebody else who has harmed you. So we are, I think that what Brazier was talking about was that concept of need for receiving external forgiveness in order for you to be able to be contrite, in order for you to be able to change, say, yes, I've done this bad stuff, but now I have been forgiven. Maybe I don't have to continue to do that. Something along those lines. So I don't know. I sometimes think about that in terms of my dog. Sometimes when my dog is bad, and if I keep yelling at it, it continues being bad. If I start to say, "Oh, good doggy," dog settles down and its behavior improves. So in the Christian view of forgiveness, it is that what happens. But Brazier is saying that is not part of Buddhism, and the little that I have grasped so far, I would agree with him that that is not what Buddhism is about. You deal with things differently. But it is not that it is not important to forgive in order to free yourself, just as Kelly said. It is as a self-care.
Good morning, everyone. For me, forgiveness just right now is kind of, would be like a Dharma gate. And it is not all encompassing of and timeless. It is in the moment, and it is a grace that I have found opens a doorway to let my compassion come up. It definitely stops my compassion with the situation that I'm angry with. And it stops my ability to cultivate anything, any movement. It is just completely, it stunts me and it stunts the other. Not that there's an other, but in relative terms. And what's happened for me with forgiveness is that it transforms into caution, self-protection, this series of things that takes place. And each time that I can soften or be compassionate, it's another piece of forgiveness. And it is the only way back to that thing. It's the only thing that allows me, that turns me around back to face it. It's not just a thing and go, let you be, and I'm not going to hold a grudge or whatever, because in my humanness, that grudge might come. But I'm learning too that the deeper pieces in the contrition is about the other 50 years of anger that had nothing to do with this person or thing that's also traveling with the current anger. And those are the things that I have to dig into so that I can discern. So the forgiveness for me is saying, I'm still in it. I'm still seeing you as suffering. It's all those pieces, but it does not commit me to have to behave a certain way, or have an expectation of that other person or thing. It just means I can move. I'm not paralyzed. At least that's what it is for me now.
That
I
sounds
think there's a lot of misunderstandings about what forgiveness is as a practice. So we could be just arguing about how we're defining words, but as a practice, I think it's worthwhile. But you know, I think there's just a lot of misunderstandings about what forgiveness actually is, and it's not an easy thing to do. But I think if we don't do that practice when we have been hurt badly, it damages us and it damages our health. And so the reason for the forgiveness is not to condone what that person did to you, or even, and you don't have to wait for them to forgive you, because you might be waiting a long time. So you make a conscious choice to go first and start working with your own pain around this. And in the process of bearing witness to your pain, you choose to take a larger perspective about that other person, what was their life like, and a whole lot of things. And it's a process of coming to a clear experiential resolution where you give up wanting to do harm to that person. You actually, and that's a real thing. It's not just a fake thing, like you pretend like you're doing. You actually come to and maybe that's what David means by contrition, is that you've actually come to a sincere resolution not to hold that grudge anymore to that person, or celebrate should they misfortune befall them. You actually give up wanting to do harm to that person, and then you've resolved that situation and you've moved past it. And I think it's a hard practice. It's not easy, but I think there's a lot of misunderstandings about what that practice is. Yeah.
Yes. The quote I have that stands out is that Zazen is the practice of repentance and also the Bodhisattva vow. So when we're practicing Zazen, we are practicing both repentance and the Bodhisattva vow. And they go together. They go together. And he's saying repentance is a kind of awakening to the incompleteness of our practice of vow. Unless we practice following our vow, we cannot see our incompleteness. Rather, we think we're okay and others are wrong. Repentance is really deeply awakening to how much we are influenced by the seventh consciousness, which I was talking about, this deep unconscious storehouse. Where our habits are maintained and can be transformed. Our habitual ways of thinking. Yes, Doug.
I spent several years studying Judaism. And one of a very important trait is to never forget the harms that have been done. They've created national holidays remembering the Holocaust. And they say, never forget, because you don't want it to happen again. So that started me thinking. I imagine when China invaded Tibet and destroyed Buddhist culture and attacked people, Buddhists, I imagine they were angry. And I also imagine that was a huge motivator to go into exile. And I wonder if the Dalai Lama has forgiven China.
He certainly has released his anger, it seems to me, about that incident. Yeah, he always has good things to say about China, it seems. So. Now,
Just some discussion.
and he practices 4 hours every day. Included in that is the chanting, you know, the Tibetan prayers. He meditates and practices every day, 4 hours.
Now, I was raised a Christian, and I've always thought the idea of never forgetting is somewhat self-destructive, but that could be because of the Christian influence of wanting to forgive people, you know. So I just think it's somewhere in between, you know.
That's really good because, you know, we've been to Auschwitz for the Bearing Witness retreat, so it's very powerful. And certainly for Japanese Americans during World War II who were unjustly interned for 2 to 3 years, lost everything. We do not want to forget that incident that happened because we do not want that to be repeated. And yes, we go on with our lives also. Can't be stuck there. Thank you for bringing that up about the Judaism and what you're taught there. Well, that was a really good discussion. Thank you, everyone. So I can see we're having a great session. Keep going. Keep going. This is such a precious time that we hardly ever take, and it's so important and grounding for us. We are part of the earth. So we will see you, let's see, at 3 o'clock we start the practice of immediacy for those who are full-time. I will have the monitor on in case you would prefer to sit. Of course, you can do that on your own as well, but I will have the monitor on in case other people might want to sit. And all right, we will see you. Thank you.